Next up, we're going to go through the abilities or spells specific to each class. And then we're going to wrap up. So for the clerics, we have two main ways to gain extra lives. The first one is Holy Shield. If you lose a pot, you can regain 100% of health lost in the hand after losing a showdown. So you get all in for chip lead, lose that, cast this, get your health back. Save this for a big hand. You only get to use it once, and it is extremely useful, extremely powerful. Next up, we have Lost in Prayer. This is the sheltering ability for the cleric. Shelter for 5 hands. Again, that's sit out, don't have to post the blinds, and heal for 5% of average health during those 5 hands. Also in the most recent patch, there is a new ability in the mix which allows some classes to steal sheltering buffs from other players. So for cleric, it's called Divine Reclamation. So if someone was lost in prayer and you cast Divine Reclamation, they lose the shelter, you take it. I think you double the size of the heal, so you get 10% healing per hand, and you add a couple hands. So I'll mention which classes have those, even though I wasn't able to include them in the videos, but they add another level of fun and complexity and strategy to the game. So next up, we have the Druid, and all these characters on the right are some of the top level design characters. You can see just how cool the heroes look in Heroes of Hold'em. So the Druid's healing ability is Barkskin. When losing at Showdown, heal for 50% of the pot lost in health. This is really good if you can get into a multi-way pot, because you get 50% of the entire pot. Not what you put in, like Holy Shield, what you lost in health, just the total pot size. So if you can get in a 4-way all-in and cast this, you double up. 6-way all-in, you triple up. Very, very, very powerful skill, one of the best in the game. Druids, to balance that, they have a shelter called Hibernate, but it's only for 4 hands, 3 at the final table, because the Druid has some stronger abilities than the Cleric, and this is one of the way that the developers balance the game by balancing the length of the shelter. Next, we have the Necromancer abilities for gaining extra lives. They have a shelter, Feign Death, same as the others, shelter for 9 hands or 3 at the final table. And then they have a couple of other things. So they don't have a lose a pot and heal ability per se, but they do have ones that let them steal health from opponents. First is Vampiric Touch. Target opponent takes 20% health pool. You leech half of that. So let's say you have 10k and chip leader's got 100k. Well, you could hit him with this. He loses 20k, you gain 10k back, and you doubled up. This is really good if you're way, way, way behind, or if you know you're going to be all in a hand. You can get all in, then cast this on the flop and steal some health, so that at the start of the next hand, even if you lose that all in, you're still in the game. So timing of this is important, but once you're all in, betting's closed, even if you gain extra health. So that's how you can kind of use Vampiric Touch as a way to keep you in the game. Next, we have Mass Hex, one of my favorite abilities in the game. All opponents gain Hex debuff for the next cycle. Hex means everyone loses 3% health per hand, for a cycle is 6 hands, and you gain all that health. So this just lets you steal a ton of health from your opponents, and if used properly is another one of the best spells in the whole game. It can't save you when you're all in, but it does let you build up your chip stack beforehand without having to play hands, so you can hopefully avoid having to go all in. All right, next we have Ranger abilities for gaining extra lives. We have the Decoy Trap, which was much like Holy Shield. If you lose a showdown, heal for 75% of your bets in the hand. And then the Shelter ability for Ranger is find shelter for 6 hands, 3 at the final table. Ranger also has an ability called Fickle Nature, which allows it to steal shelter buffs from other players. And yeah, same thing. You double the health bonus and extend the amount of hands that you're sheltering for. But for it to work, someone else has to first cast a shelter. So sometimes you have it and you don't get to use it. Next, we have the Thief abilities for gaining extra lives. First is Pilfer. If you lose at Showdown, heads up, steal 25% of the pot. So a good healing spell steals 25% of the total pot, not the amount of health that you lost, but it does have to be heads up. If you get to a multi-way pot and lose on the river, you won't be able to cast Pilfer here. Sleight of Hand, target opponent takes 20% of their health pool and damage. You gain an equal amount. That's pretty much the same as Vampiric Touch. It's just for a little bit more. And then finally, we have Alibi. Heal for 50% of a pot you lose at Showdown. Redirect that damage to the nearest minion to you clockwise. So this one's good. In many ways, it's better than Pilfer because it's for twice as much. But the one condition is there has to be a minion for you to direct that damage to. If there are no minions on the table, you will not be able to cast this spell, and it will not be able to save you with an all-in. So the Thief has more contingencies and situationality required for their abilities to work, but they do have a few good ones in the mix. Next, we have the Warrior abilities for gaining extra lives. First one is Drinking Buddies. If an adjacent opponent wins this hand, leech 40% of the pot. Now, it may sound similar to the round of drinks with the boys I talked about earlier here. 20% chance to win 15% of the pot. But the difference is, first, that it's not 15%. You are getting 40% of the pot. And second, it's not 20% of the time it activates. If a player to your left or right wins, you can choose whether or not you want to cast this, and you can leech 40% of the pot in a hand you didn't even play in. So really powerful spell here. Next, we have one that is similar to Barkskin and the other one we saw. Fully Armored. When losing at Showdown, heal for 35% of the pot. So it's the same as Barkskin, except it's 35% instead of 50%. So another good one to use in a multi-way pot, or just as a last chance if you lose a heads-up pot that's really meaningful. You won't get your full stack back, but you'll get 2/3 of it back by using this. And then finally, you have Mercenary Contract. If you raise this hand previously, win 45% of the pot if you lose. This is really good if you get into an all-in situation, maybe a flip, and you don't know whether you're going to win or not. By casting Mercenary Contract, you either get your money back, which is 45% of the pot if you lose, or if you win, you get the full size of the pot. This would not activate if you win the pot, so you would just lose the spell, but it's still good to have as a backup for, those crucial all-in situations. And then finally, we have the Wizard abilities for gaining extra lives. First, we have Arcane Medicine, which is like Holy Shield, just not for as much. When losing a Showdown, recover 60% of the pot in health. Ooh, actually, I'd have to double check if it's of the pot size or of how much you put in. Sometimes the wording in the white paper is different than what's in the client. The client is what's most up to date and most accurate. So I feel like it's 60% of what you put into the pot, but maybe it's 60% of the pot. And then finally, we have Astral Projection, which is kind of like a free straddle thing, but a little bit better when it works. Leave your body, allowing you to automatically call any bets the entire hand without costing yourself health. So you post the blind for free. You have to use this under the gun. And then if people bet, even if they get to the point that they're all in, you will automatically match those bets. Even if you don't have enough chips in your stack to meet their bets, you'll still cover it because of the power of Astral Projection. So this is really good to use if you think a couple of people are going to play a big pot, or people are short, you think they're going to have to go all in, because it generates a ton of free chips. The downside to this is if people see you're casting it, they can just check down and you get the free blind pre-flop, but you won't get bets post-flop. Usually people don't catch that, but the more advanced players will, so that's something to consider with Astral Projection. But it is one of the great ways for Wizard to generate a lot of chips, which is a class that's... Wizard's more about board changing abilities, so this is the one that they have in the mix. And that's going to cover the abilities by class. That's going to cover pretty much anything and everything I had to share about Heroes of Hold'em.